He played more than 130 games at AFL level, including a grand final. Yet he is remembered best for his violent on-field behaviour, principally for removing several of Terry Wallace's teeth without appointment or anaesthetic. He was a favourite of the Melbourne faithful. He was the Melbourne player opposition supporters loved to hate. Welcome, Rodney Grinter.
Thanks, Mike.
Is your reputation fair?
Well, I guess if you have a look at the history, it probably is yes. But, you know, I played 134 games, which I'm very proud of. And you've got to be able to play the game to be able to play that many games.
Correct, yeah. Now, your reputation's balls. We in the media always referred to you as the Melbourne hard man.
Yep.
Were you tough? Were you dirty? Or were you a combination of both?
I wouldn't say I was dirty. I was just hard at it. And, you know, if the ball was there to be won, I would go and do whatever I could to win it. And if someone got in my way, well, I just ran through them.
I'm interested as to why you agreed. I was really pleased when you said that you would come on, but I was interested in the rationale. I sat with you and your wife Bernadette at Ron Barassi's 80th birthday celebration recently. Yep. And when your reputation came up, Bernadette, who seemed to be a very gentle, charming girl, clearly cringed when that discussion was on the agenda again.
Yeah, well, I think every time anybody speaks to me about my footy, that gets brought up. And she doesn't like it because it brings out the bad side of me, I guess. And she obviously would prefer to hear better things about me.
What a lovable husband you are.
Yes, father and husband, yes.
Yeah, but you said at the same function, you told me that you did have white line fever.
Yeah, I did. There's no doubt about that. I'm certainly a mild person away from the footy field. But when I played, I went out there and I could do whatever I needed to do to win a game of footy for Melbourne.
Inside or outside the rules?
Well, you'd say with my history and reports, outside.
So, 10 reports,
yep.
31 weeks suspended. That's a season and a half.
It's a waste.
It's a waste. I was going to ask you how you look back on that and reflect on what might have been.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was disappointed that I missed so much footy, but I guess I lived on the edge when I played, and you know I had to obviously live up to those rules and regs at the time. So disappointing.
You say you lived on the edge. My memory of you is you were quite a stylish footballer. Your hands were good, lovely kick. So you didn't need to be anything other than a natural footballer, did you?
Well, I think if I didn't play the way that I played, and that was living on the edge, I don't think I would have played as many games as I did. Because that was certainly something that the intimidation factor helped me get games, I believe.
You believe that, do you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yet you'd come through, you'd played in Melbourne's under-19 premiership team
83.
in, I think, 83.
Yeah.
You'd come through with that. You were the best first-year player in 1985.
Yep.
So why the doubts about your ability just to play the game as everyone else did?
Well, I think it goes back from when I was a kid. I played at hard and tough, and that was the way that I was brought up. And I continued that through my whole career. And yeah, it certainly cost me weeks. But it was the way I played, and I don't think I could go out and play differently, even though I knew what I was doing was wrong, but it was just the way that I played. It was the way I was made up.
The disappointment, though, is that you played 10 years of football, including 11 finals with Melbourne, and yet averaged only 13 games a season.
Yeah, well, I wasn't a regular. You know, there was a period of...
Yes, you were.
Well, there was a period of time, it's sort of between 87 and 89, that I would have played 18 games. But then there was, like my first 2 years, I played 11 and 11. So I was in, out. So, and I had to work a lot harder than the other guys. My endurance levels weren't great. So I used to run around the Albert Park Lake before training, and I'd be in the gym doing all my weights before training, then go out and train just to keep up with the level of fitness that I needed to play league footy.
You know, we're going to talk about the Wallace incident. I told you that before we started.
Yep.
It's round 2, 1988. You're playing at Whitten Oval. Terry Wallace is the Bulldog centre man. Pick up the story then. There's a marking contest. You're coming from behind.
Yeah, so it came out of our forward line, down the wing. The ball was kicked long, so I've left my opponent to attack the footy, and I had this bad habit of round arm tackles and round arm spoils. And this one obviously ended in a really bad situation where I copped Terry right across the mouth, and he was not. I don't think he was KO'd, but he was certainly. He wasn't that well, and yeah, it was just one of those things. I missed the ball by a whisker, and I've said this every time I've been asked, and If you slow the vision down, I do miss the ball by a whisker. However, the video cameras, or the camera that was there that day, there was one, and it was on the wing, so we didn't have different angles, and all it really showed was me coming into the picture and a round arm or coat hanger, the old coat hanger, and copped him high.
Well, let's relive it, mate, and see if your version of it matches with the reality. How do you feel when you see that?
Yeah, it's not good. It's really...
So you've missed by more than a whisker there, right?
Missed the ball, yeah. And it's vicious, and it was reckless, obviously high, and I'm not proud of it, but it was one of those things you can't obviously take back.
When you left your man to go to that contest, very difficult this one, to know what's it, because it's so instinctive, this game.
Yeah.
Do you remember what was in your mind?
No, I didn't know that Terry was there. I didn't even see him. My focus was on the footy, and like I said earlier, I did have this habit of round arm tackles. I'd broken both thumbs for round arm tackles, hitting guys on the hip when I was trying to tackle them through my career. And this was another classic round arm action that wasn't really appropriate.
Did Plough take the free kick? Do you remember?
No, he got carried off.
Okay, so you're standing on the mark, and you've got blood streaming from a very handsome wound in your left hand.
Yeah, I didn't realise at the time. So when it had all happened, I'm standing on the mark with my hands on my hip. The runner come out, Robbie Sayers had come out and said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine, but I think Terry's in a bit of trouble." And he said, "I think you better come off." And it was just the start of the game, and I was really pumped and wanted to do well. And I said, "No, I'm not going anywhere." And he said, "I think you better come off, have a look at your hands." So because my hands were spread on my hips, I had a whole 50-cent, size of a 50-cent piece in my hand. And so I had to go off and went in and got it stitched up in the old change rooms out at Whitten Oval, and ended up getting really badly infected.
How many stitches?
I think it was a dozen.
A dozen,
Yeah.
Wow.
So his teeth went sliced right through.
When you saw him, the Grinter that the opposition supporters saw, most people would have thought, "Oh, well, he's done that. There's probably a degree of malice in it and intent." When you were standing over him and realised what had happened, how did you feel?
I didn't really feel anything. It was just because it was the start of the game and I was pumped, and there wasn't really a feeling. I just was wanting to get on with the game. Not one Footscray player remonstrated with me. There was
no reports?
No reports. There was an umpire 20 metres, and there was another umpire that was on the boundary line, who was an emergency umpire, who could have laid a report. They could have both laid a report, but because of the way that the play happened, it was in play. Yes, it was high and it was reckless, but there was no malice as far as intentional doing that.
What would you get today if you did that?
I don't think I'd probably get much more than I got then. I got six. Got six.
So they started an inquiry, no report from the game, and then there was an inquiry because of the outcry.
Yeah, well, they kept playing it. They kept playing it on the telly, and because it was such a bad angle, the AFL had to take some action, and I got trial by video, booked on trial by video.
You spend that night with teammate Todd Viney.
Yep.
You wake up next morning with your hand the size of a football and throbbing and infected. When the realisation set in about what had happened to you and because of what had happened to Terry Wallace,
yep.
What was your thought process then?
Well, I went to the doctor because I had cold sweats, hand was throbbing, and I wanted to contact Terry. So I contacted David Flintoff, and David Flintoff played with Terry at Hawthorn. So he had his number, so I rang Terry and asked how he was, and I apologised for what had happened, and he was quite good over the phone. He said, "No worries, thanks for ringing," and then I was admitted to the hospital in Windsor, and I stayed.
You spent a week in hospital?
A week there with an infected hand.
Did Plough play the next week?
Yeah, he did.
He did, and you didn't?
He got 3 votes.
Did he really?
Plough,
yeah. So in your phone conversation with him, was it lengthy or was it just functional?
No, it was just I just wanted to touch base with him and let him know that I'm...
You said you were sorry?
Sorry for what had happened, and his response was, "Thanks for ringing. What happens on the footy field stays on the footy field."
Was it 2 years later that Plough sued you in Melbourne?
I'm not sure the length of time from it, but yeah, that's right.
Who won?
We settled.
You had to pay?
Footy club were fantastic.
Yeah. Do you know, can you prepare to tell me how much they paid?
No.
Tens of thousands?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Were you angry? Were you angry that if Plough says to you what happens on the footy field stays on the field?
Yeah.
and you accept that. Were you angry then that there was subsequent legal action?
Definitely.
You were?
Yeah.
You thought he'd sort of abrogated his rights to sue?
It was one of those things that happened on a footy field and was unfortunate. But then to take the action that was taken was very disappointing.
You know, when on your own admission, when people talk to you about your footy career, it always goes back to the Wallace incident. Do you resent that? Even though you caused that, do you think that there's the fact that you're a very competent AFL player who played in a grand final, do you resent the fact that that's sort of almost secondary?
Well, I can't take it away. It happened. It was there. It was very highly publicised at the time, so it is something that people do remember because it was played a lot. It was in the paper. There was a lot of stuff that followed that. So there was a tribunal hearing, and then there was the civil case that happened after that. So it was people of my vintage that go to the footy remember that. So they always ask about it. Is
it disappointment, or do you feel, is there any element of shame about the way lots of things transpired in your footy career?
No, I'm not shameful for it.
No.
I'm very proud of playing 10 years or 13 years at the Melbourne Footy Club. From a kid that came from the country, all I wanted to do when I was growing up was play senior footy at Katandra.
Yep.
So to get the opportunity to come down and play for the Melbourne Footy Club and last as long as I did, I was very proud of that. Now, there was things that happened throughout that 13 years that I'm not proud of. However, that was the way it was, and I can't rewind the clock to take them back.
Were you a wild kid at Katandra West? Some of your mates who I know said that you came down, you're pretty wild when you landed in Melbourne.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Wild in what sense? Law breaking, or just sort of?
I was just a bit of a lad.
Bit of a lad.
Didn't mind a drink and had a good time.
How do you feel when I say to you that no Melbourne player has been reported or suspended for more games than you? How does that sit with you?
Well, I don't know, to be honest. It's not something you can be proud of having.
Well, sometimes, sorry to interrupt, but sometimes I get the impression you quite like your reputation as Rodney Grinter hard man.
I'd rather be that than the other way.
The other way being careful.
Soft. Being soft. Yeah. I like footballers that are hard and tough and play the game that way.
You're now Director of Coaching at St Kevin's in the APS system.
Yes.
You've been there for best part of 20 years?
17 years.
17 years, yeah. When a young Grinter type comes across your radar, what do you say to him?
I tell him to continue to play the way that he plays, to attack the ball with aggression, and if the man's got the ball, we'll attack him with aggression. I don't think you can play our game if you don't have that in your makeup, because it is a tough, hard physical game.
But there are restrictions, aren't there?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. No, we don't want to attack the man high, or certainly the things that got me into trouble. I don't advocate that at all. But I want players, the young boys at school footy, to play tough and hard footy.
Given the thing that it's the way you played your footy, you would know that players in the other team would take an opportunity to square up, live by the sword, die by the sword. Do you remember those occasions when you thought, I'm not sure where I am here, but there's probably someone coming for me?
Not really, to be honest. No, I never felt threatened on a footy field. I never was worried. Didn't matter who we were playing. Even when I finished playing league footy and went down to Tasmania, there was a lot of people saying to me, be careful. There'll be people out there that want to get
you were captain coach of New Norfolk?
New Norfolk, down in Tassie, yep. And not once did that happen. In my post-AFL footy career, did I have anybody wanting to snipe me or look to snipe me.
Okay. 1988 grand final. Bittersweet memories for you. The Demons get smashed by, I think, a then record score.
Yeah, it was.
But you played in the grand final.
Yeah.
Tell us about those
memories.
Look,
it was, again, one of those things that we all play footy for, to play in a grand final and a premiership if you're lucky enough. For Melbourne in 87, we made the finals for the first time in, I'm not sure whether it was 64, but it was a long, long time.
It was, yeah.
So to be a part of that that era at the footy club was very exciting, and to rock up on grand final day. The thing that I probably am a little bit disappointed about, I didn't realise what the occasion was. Like I certainly do now. Like I go.
What do you mean? You didn't think it was as big as it was?
Yeah. It was just one of those things that, and I guess when players are playing footy in those, you're playing finals and you're evolving as a club and doing quite well. It's just what happens. So it wasn't. And I was 23, I think 22 or 23. So it was just something, this is what happens. We're fortunate
Really?
enough. Yeah.
You were in
Ended
Melbourne's
up
best that day, which probably wasn't a major achievement because of the way it transpired.
Yeah. Well, we had a lot of ball down the back.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, there were. Now, you mentioned 87 in passing. Little known fact that I discovered, I know you know it, but that I discovered doing my research on you, you actually conceded the free kick that led to Gary Buckenara, having the shot for goal in the last minute, correct?
Correct.
And then, fortunately for you, Jimmy Steins runs across the mark. There's a 15-metre penalty. Bucky kicks the goal. You missed the grand final. What happened? What was it? A legitimate free? Had you done something?
Yeah. No, I was playing forward that day. Kicked a couple of goals, and then in the last quarter, Stephen Newport was playing on Buckenara, and the runner comes out. You're going back. We want you to pick up Bucky, and the game, because we were in control of the game for 3 quarters, 3.5 quarters.
Because you had the win for 3 quarters.
We did. It was everything was going our way, and then we'd had many shots in that last quarter that, if we had nailed one of them, we would have been victors and we would have been playing in a grand final against Carlton. So I get moved on to Buckenara. So I'm playing deep in their forward line. The ball comes out from full back. So it was a Peter Swab kick straight down the middle, handle off to Tucky, I think, and Tucky kicked to...
Big bomb,
to Bucky leading. And I tripped over his feet and fell into his back.
Okay. Did you know that the siren had sounded?
No. Jimmy wouldn't have run across the mark if he hadn't known the siren was bellowing, because Dipper had run down the wing to try and get a shot closer to goal. So Jimmy had just run straight between me and Buckenara to pick up Dipper. And the umpires didn't hear the siren. We didn't hear the siren. So he gets the 15-metre penalty.
When that happened, when the ball's sailing through, you can see it, and the grand final is suddenly pinched away from you, how'd you feel? Was it
devastation.
How emotional is that when a grand final berth is within your grasp and you let it slip? Yeah,
look, it was really disappointing because we had, like I said, many opportunities to seal the game in that last quarter, but we just weren't able to. And credit to them, they just kept clawing away and got us right at the death knot.
John Swipper-Northey was your coach.
Yep.
He loved his footballers playing hard footy, didn't he?
Yes.
Did he incite you to play the way you played, or was that natural?
No, he never said anything about doing anything untoward. That was just the way that I played. So there was one game against Footscray where a young Leon Cameron was playing on the wing and was toweling us up. Was very young. I was playing a half-back flank, and the runner come out and just said, "You're playing on him." Didn't have to say anything more.
Did you whack him?
No, I didn't.
No.
I just put the fear of life into him.
Did you? How do you do that without whacking them? Just verbals?
Verbal, yeah.
And he fell for that, did he?
He did. He was only young. He was only a young fella.
Yeah. Good player, Leon, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. Very good.
A friend of mine was involved with a kid called Ash Walker. Played seconds. You were playing seconds at Melbourne.
Melbourne, yeah.
You were captain of Melbourne seconds.
Yep.
Playing Fitzroy.
Yep.
This kid, you was in a collision with you. You ran into him.
Yep.
I think with your hip.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Okay. He never played again.
No. It was one of those ones where he had his head over the footy, and I'd come running in from the side and collected him right on the top of his head with my hip. Not sure whether it knocked him out at the time, but certainly did some inner balance damage to his balance. Yeah. And I don't think he played again.
So when someone like me's trawling through your career and focusing on those negatives, you get irritated?
Well, yeah, you do, because, but it is, like I said before, it's one of those things that you can't shy away from. It's happened. So people are entitled to talk about it and ask questions.
Okay.
So I have no problems with that. However, it is a little bit frustrating at times, and this is where my Bernadette was coming from, that's all people focus on. They don't focus on, I played 13 years for the Melbourne Footy Club, played over 100 games, which I'm very proud of. Was
the high point the grand final?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the ultimate that we played in night games back then. We won the 87 night premiership, we won the 89 night premiership, and we played in the day grand final in 88. So it was
amazing
exciting.
For young Melbourne supporters to think that under Swipper-Northey you finished top 4 5 times in a row, I think, didn't you?
Yeah. It was
5 top 4 finishes in a row.
And we had always had a bit of a lull in the middle of the season where we'd lose 4 or 5 in a row, and then we'd have to do everything we possibly could to, just like in 87, to make the finals, when if we had have won those games in the middle of the year. but we were able to do that. And then when we got there, we played reasonably well.
Rod, the Melbourne Footy Club have been floundering for a long time. The under-19 premiership team group comes through. Grinter, Greg Healy, Graham Yates,
Newport.
Stephen Newport.
Yep.
Seemed to lift the standards at Melbourne. Seemed as if the horizons just broadened because you blokes were saying we can get to this level if we work harder.
Yeah, certainly there was a core group that came through together, and we were able to gel as a unit, and we did whatever we could for one another and looked after one another, and that showed when we played.
Your mates remember these things. You were always first at training. You were zealous on the training track, did all the right things, and actually you introduced the extra sessions on your notional day off.
Yeah, look, it was, like I said earlier, my endurance wasn't a strong point of mine, and one of the things that I'd always done was train hard and play hard, and you'll get the best out of yourself.
Your coaches were Ron Brassie for 1 year?
Yes.
And then Swooper? And then Neil Baum.
Neil Baum for the last two.
All different individuals, aren't they?
Very.
Yeah.
Very. We talk about Barras being that legend of the...
Was he that much of a legend that you were scared to talk to him?
Yeah, you were intimidated by him, absolutely. So you have him, and then we get John Northey, who's a real motivator, us against them. Everybody in the AFL hates Melbourne, wants Melbourne to not survive.
Is that what Swooper would say?
Yeah, all the time. And he'd cut out articles in the paper and put them up on the walls, and we'd all be running out with fire out of our ears and wanted to just do whatever we could to win. And then we get big Neil Baum, who comes in with a reputation of a tough, big Richmond player, and he's big. So intimidation-wise, with the size of the man, and it's probably a little bit similar to me in terms of you play hard, but then off the field you're a different person, and Neil was certainly that. But gave me another opportunity. I was getting close to the end of my career and ended up playing me forward, and ended up playing another sort of 20-odd games, 25 games under Neil.
Because you looked like you were gone at one point.
Yeah, certainly in 92. Yep. 92 I reckon I played 1 or 2 games. But then when Barmy came, he threw me forward and was able to kick a few goals and pick up another 20 games.
Did you get delisted at one point?
At the end of my career, I found out by watching the TV when they bring up the delistings and the people coming into a footy club.
You say, I know that bloke, that's me.
I said, Grinter delisted. What's going on? Well,
and you didn't know? No one had told you?
No one had told me. So I think there was a breakdown in communication, because I rang Richard Griffiths, and he was our footy manager at the time, and he said, didn't Neil talk to you?
Wow.
And then they went on then to ask me to stay around and be captain of the seconds in 95.
Were you offended by that?
I was disappointed, yeah, like anybody would. You've given your heart and soul to the footy club, and nobody tells you that you're not going to be able to play league footy again.
So you come back to Melbourne when Neil Danaher takes over as coach, and you're the coach's runner. First year 2000?
That's correct, yeah.
Grand final year?
Yeah.
I wonder what would have happened, Rod, had you been out on the ground when Dean Wallace snotted Brad Green early in the game. Would you have been able to control yourself?
I would have, yeah, absolutely. I was 35, 36, so I'd grown up a bit. As a runner, that's not what you do, so you could certainly verbalise, you could get into them verbally, but...
Did you do that?
Yeah, I did that, yeah.
Who copped your best sledge, do you remember? Is there one that stands out?
Croft didn't like what I said to him when Simon Godfrey was tagging him and doing a good job on him.
Yeah.
And he actually ran into me.
Did he really? You've got to say something clever to get under the skin of a bloke who's played 300 games.
I would have been swearing at him, calling him a so-and-so, and he...
Croft fell for that?
Yeah, he did. And we're having a shot for goal, and I'm standing outside the 50, and I've looked over, and he's running at me, and I'm thinking, he's going to run into me.
And he did?
And he did.
Did he?
Yeah, and I asked him if he's taken some tough pills today, and got away.
Now that gets under their skin, doesn't it? I'll revert back to the bad Rodney Grinter for one more occasion.
Haven't we been down that path enough?
We have. I forgot one. 1990, a game against Richmond.
Oh, yes.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
You ended up missing 9 weeks of football because of incidents that day and a carryover suspension of 3 weeks. What happened?
I think the AFL at the time, or the tribunal at the time, didn't want me playing, because every time I went up, I got 4 or 5 for the most minor things.
Most minor? You mean most minor?
Yeah, some of them were really just trivial.
Were they?
Yeah, but I would get 4 or 5 every time I went up, because they had a reputation, and so I think that was an agenda. But
You're saying that the AFL,
I'm not saying the AFL did, but I felt that there was certainly an
the
agenda.
tribunal wanted you out of the game.
Neil Busy was the chairman of the tribunal.
Yeah, he was, yeah.
Through all, and I remember him looking down, his glasses down, and oh, you're here again.
Did he say that?
The Richmond game, I had a 3-week suspended sentence
Hanging over your
my
head, yeah.
Yep. And it was just before quarter time. I jumped in the front of Jeff Hogg, who'd led out from full forward, and he clocked me in the back of the head. And so I was spread eagled. The siren had sounded, so the players were all walking back to their huddle, and big Mark Lee was trundling past and called me a weak so-and-so, get up, and I just saw red and ran in and just punched him in the stomach, which was really just stupid because cameras were on me. So I ended up getting 3 weeks
For a punch in the stomach.
plus the 3 weeks
Yeah.
suspended.
So
that's
it's 6. Yep.
And then later in the game, Graham Yates had been knocked over and I'm helping him up off the ground, and Andy Goodwin came running in really quickly just to stand the mark. And I saw him coming, and as he got to me, I just gave him a little left jab, and it was nothing, and he went down like I'd stabbed him. And so I got reported for that, and I got a 3 weeks plus a 3-week suspended for that.
Are you proud of where you've ended up? You know, you've given this traumatic start to your adult life, where you are now. I mean, your reputation's so much healthier now, more positive, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think you grow up, you get older, you're a bit more mature, and I've got a family that I needed to support, so I needed to head down, bum up, and make sure that I looked after them. So I've been working like I've always worked since I've come down to Melbourne. Never not worked. Never had anything professionally as far as footy goes. So and I've worked really hard, and I enjoy catching up with past players, and involved obviously chairman of the Melbourne Footy Club past players, and currently chairman of the VFL Club, which is a foundation that raises money for charity, and we hold 2 or 3 events a year.
This is literally one of those colourful careers, and I genuinely mean this. I think you did some things that probably you wouldn't do your time over again.
Yep.
But I think it's important that people remember that you're a pretty good player. You're a permanent player in a very good team in that era in the late 80s.
Yep.
And I admire your courage in actually allowing someone like me to bring up or reopen these old sores, and it's good to catch up.
No worries. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Rod.